Some conversations I have with people in terms of this, in terms of the blessing and the curses and how God works with money and tithing and all that, some conversations I've had with people they've been raised to a certain degree that well, this is an Old Testament thing. This is a theological, construct that was created in the contract version of God's plan, and that's not how the New Testament does it, and that's not how the church should do it, and that's not the same anymore. And here's the problem. Again, when you start attaching outcomes to things, you can get really messed up in terms of reading Scripture. When you just look at what Scripture says in terms of how it teaches what it teaches in terms of what God created, this is not an Old Testament thing. Jesus addresses it several different ways in the Gospels. The most famous way and the most famous sermon that most people hear in terms of this is from Matthew 25. And it's a message where Jesus tells a parable. He talks about a king, a master, who goes away and he gives his servants all something different. He gives them all some resources, some things that, talents is what it's called. And he says, I'm going to give you 5 and I'm going to give you 2 and I'm going to give you 1. I want you to enjoy these and use these and go do something with them. And so they do. The one with 5 goes out and does 5. He's enjoying what the master gave him. And he's also seeing plenty to come. He's seeing more to spare. And he actually gains 5 more. The one with 2 goes and enjoys and goes and leverages it and actually gets 2 more. But the guy with 1 didn't enjoy it at all. He just took it and he buried it. Now, when Jesus describes the conversation that happens when the master comes back, because we're all accountable to the master, he describes the conversation and he says, to the ones that had 5 and the one that had 2, he gives the same response. The master says, and he was full of praise, well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling the small amount. Now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's party. That's what he says, right? He's like, listen, not only have you enjoyed it, not only have you got to use what I gave you, not only did you see it grow, did you see it multiply, I'm going to now bless you with even more. And the one that had 1, that didn't enjoy it, didn't use it, did nothing with it, the master responds. And he says, you wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, this is his excuse, by the way. He says, why didn't you at least deposit my money in the bank? At least it could have gotten some interest. And he goes on and says, then he ordered, take the money from this servant and give it to the one who had 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they're given, even more will be given. And to those who have, they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. And then he tells them to cast the guy into outer darkness where the worms won't die. And that's either a description of hell or a description of the dump outside Jerusalem. I don't really know. Because actually both are used to describe the dump outside Jerusalem and hell. All I know is it sure does sound an awful lot like blessing and curse. Nod your head if you're with me, right? God seems to still bless when we use what we've been given and follow his instructions and do what he's asked us to do, and he seems to still curse when we choose not to. Sure doesn't seem like an Old Testament thing. It seems like a God thing. Again, a system with predictable outcomes, with rules you can bank on, an ironclad system that he gave you instructions to follow so that you could receive everything he wanted you to receive. Whether in times of abundance, with plenty to spare, or whether in times of struggle and storm, God will always be enough and will always provide enough for you. Everybody with me? Now.